In this video, we are going to take a look at building a parametric family. So it's going to be a little bit different than our typical start where you're just starting a new project or a model. Now, instead of that, we're going to go to families here and we're going to say new. You're going to want to make sure you pick the right category here. You should be pretty familiar with these by now, the same categories that you see in your visibility graphics. And for this, I'm just going to go with generic model, and I'm just going to go none of the ones. I don't want it to be any of the based ones, just generic model for this first round here. Let me go ahead and open. All right, so it starts us in a plan view, just like it would in a project. And here's our two reference planes. And this right here is going to be your origin. And that's important too, that's going to be where your mouse goes when you go to place this in a project. So you've probably noticed that with other families that sometimes your mouse is in the center of it, sometimes it's over to the left, depending on what you're building. That can be useful to make sure that where your mouse is, it makes it easier to place the family because of that. So for this one, I'm going to build up into the upper right quadrant here. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my Create tab. And the first thing that I'm going to do is put in reference planes. All right, it's important that we use reference planes over reference lines for this. And anytime we're building a parametric family, think of the reference planes as the framework for the family. And then once we have the framework of the reference planes in, we're going to put dimensions in. And then we're going to apply parameters to those dimensions. And then after that, we'll build in our forms. Okay, so we're reference planes first, then dimensions, apply parameters to dimensions, then build your forms. Okay, and then the forms get locked to the reference planes. And then that's how they're allowed to be controlled by the parameters. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll start this out with our two reference planes here. So I'm going to draw one. I'm just going to build a parametric cube. So I'm just going to draw in two reference planes here. I'm going to go back to my annotate tab. All right, I'm going to put in dimensions. I'm going to go one for my length, one for depth. And these aren't, clean dimensions. That's okay. You can adjust them so that they're clean, but really the important part is that we're going to put parameters on them. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this dimension here, and I'm going to go up here to where it says label. And I don't have any right now, so I'm going to go right next to it to where it says create parameter. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and create this parameter. That's all that I need to do for this. I don't need to worry about anything else right now. I just give it a name. I say okay. Now that parameter is associated to these two reference planes. All right, I'm going to do the same thing here. New parameter, width or depth there. All right, and now I want to make sure that I don't forget about my 3D. So I'm going to go into my elevation. Any elevation will do. Create tab, reference plane. And I'm going to throw in a reference plane. Next step is dimension. And then after that, apply a parameter. All right, so now I have all of my parameters and dimensions in place with parameters applied. So now I can go ahead and build in my form. So I'm going to go to my Create tab, Extrusion. And I like to use the pick lines for this. It makes it very easy to lock the lines to the reference planes. So I'm going to go ahead and select pick lines, and I'm going to click on the reference plane and then lock it, click, lock, click, lock, click, lock. All right, you can see it goes to the extent of the plane. So we need to use our trim tool, 2 clicks. Whoops, missed that one. There we go. Remember clicking on the pieces that you want to keep, 1 click, 2 click, 1 click, 2 click. So I'll go ahead and finish that. Again, that's just my X and Y. So I want to make sure to go back to that elevation, and I'm going to adjust that, pull that cube up, and I'm going to lock it. All right, and there we go. So let's go ahead and take a look at 3D here. And the families by default open a lot of different windows. It's just a WT and then a ZA shortcuts here. I'm going to close those. I really just want the floor plan that I closed and a 3D view. There we go. All right, so now I have my cube here. So I like to always test out my parameters before I load this into a project. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my, not that one, my family types here. All right, so that's the 4 blue boxes in the bottom corner. It's basically your properties if you were your type properties if you were in a project. So I'm going to click on that and I can test out my parameters. I just want to make sure that everything is working well and isn't broken. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to apply. So there's my height that is adjusting well. All right, that's a little bit high out of the range there. All right, and let's check length. Good, and then let's check my width. Great. Okay, so everything is working. All of my parameters are associated, and it is moving this around. So let's go ahead and start a project so I can load this in. All right, and then I do want to make sure that I do a save as for the family and give it a name. Cube will be great. Save that. All right, and then I'm going to load it into the project and close it, and then click to place. All right, so right now, if I look at my types, I only have one. This is cube, but because of those parameters, it allows me to create more. All right, so that's like the desk and a lot of the furniture and other items you've been working with over the semester that have parameters applied already. That's what allows you to create different types and add more of them. You can add these types in the project or in the family themselves. So we're in the project already, so I'll go ahead and create some new ones in here. So let's call this, if this is cube 2, I would probably put the sizes on here, but let's see. Maybe we go with a 3 by 4 by 5. All right, and I have a different type. Oh, I forgot to duplicate it first. Let's go ahead and copy a couple of these. All right, so now I have cube and I have cube 2. And let's go with cube 3. And maybe that one's going to be 7 by 3 by 9. There you go. So now we have different instances, different types of this cube that we built. And we're able to edit those because of the parameters that we put in there. And then we're also going to do a material parameter. So we didn't do that yet, but that's no problem. We can always go back in to edit the family and open that up. So I'm going to edit the family. And now, since I've edited that family, those 3 types are in here. I'm going to go ahead and add a material parameter. So I'm going to select the cube, go down here on the properties, and instead of, I don't want to just apply a material. If I do that, that means every type of the cube that I create will have that same material. But if I want different types to have different materials, I'm going to click on that gray button and I'm going to add a parameter name. All right, it's already grouped under materials and finishes, which is just what I want. I'm going to say okay. All right, so now I have a material. It's really important to note that this family is now different than the first cube that I made, right? Because the first cube did not have these additional types in there and it didn't have the material applied to it. So if you want to save those changes, do a save as, and you could either overwrite that or you could do a new family. I'm just going to overwrite it though, but you could always do a save as and do a new family. But I'm going to overwrite it because I want to keep this name the same so that when I load this back into my project, it's going to have the same name. So I went in, I made changes to my family, I'm bringing it back in. I would say like 95% of the time I use this bottom one where you're going to overwrite the existing version and its parameter values. A good indicator of knowing when you want to use this of overwriting the parameter values is thinking about the edits that you did. All right, so when I was in the family, I made edits to the parameters themselves, right? I added a material parameter. So since I made edits to those parameters, I definitely want to overwrite the parameter values. So I'm going to say yes. All right, and now if I go into my 3D view, let's go ahead and switch this over to realistic. And if I go back into my edit type, now I have a new parameter. So that's the one that we just added here. And now I can go into my browser and select a material for that. All right, because I made it a parameter, it didn't apply it to all of those, and I'm able to go in and edit it for each of these items. Let's give that one a go. Sure. There we go. So now I have a custom family that I made that is parametric, which means I can adjust any of the items that have parameters applied to them in their type properties.